Well, I just love that we started off talking about weather because that's my most commonly used analogy for mental health is that, yeah, some days it's just kind of cloudy. And then it's
Yeah,
just how I deal with the clouds, basically.
yeah, and I think that's a really beautiful thing that we'll use to kind of to jumpstart this as we start the episode. Again, for people that maybe didn't listen to the last episode, I'm here with Jonah. Um,
Hello.
and, talking about mental health, what we were just touching on right there, using weather, I think, is one of the most universally understood analogies for mental
Right,
health
right.
because
There's a reason
everybody
there's a
sees
small
weather.
talk thing called talking about the weather. It's just
Yeah,
something that we're all in, we all kind of feel. It's an interesting thing. So it makes it a great metaphor, yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Or
So,
analogy or whatever.
with that being said, let's use that as the metaphor. What's
Let's
the
get in
weather
there.
like in Jonah's world right now? It was deeper than I intended it to be. I know.
It's a clear it's a clear day, and it's one of those days where the visibility is so good, in fact, that I can see so far away that it starts to feel overwhelming or something like that, the
Yeah.
space. That's the first best thought I can come up with is that I feel real clear these days and not as distracted by different weather patterns as I have been for a lot of my life. And that feels fantastic and a lot feels possible. And then that possibility thing, I think that wide open feeling of awe, feeling of possibility, feeling of mystery, feeling of what is happening, and it's I think that might be the feeling that a lot of the moods that I choose in different ways are trying to cover up because it's kind of a take my breath away sort of feeling, and it's beautiful and it's also kind of scary, and I find myself kind of frozen in its presence. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really visually striking, thinking about I imagine it looking out over water for my own perspective
Great,
of it.
great, yeah, perfect.
But looking out so far where like the horizon's there because we know the horizon's there, but we can't tell how far away it is, what's at the edge of that horizon, what am I going to pass along the way, what's going to come in between me and that. And I think that's a really beautiful thing that you're in this clarity right now where I can see endless possibility in front of me, but I also am receptive and acknowledge that there's potential for some disrupting weather along this journey.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, the neat thing about the horizon is that you never get there. So,
Right.
uh, and that's the whole deal is that yearning for the horizon, that yearning to know what's going to happen next, of course, that yearning to be better, to be cooler, to be hotter, to be richer, to be older, to be younger, to all the things, all the horizons. There's never any getting there. And again, I think I'm going to sort of introduce the idea that to some degree, I choose the moods that I inhabit. And it's not to make light or be dismissive in any way of mental illness. It's just kind of on a personal level what I've kind of found out after what I've come to believe after a ton of work, endless, life's long, fun, joyous, crazy, mental health fun work is, yeah, I tend to choose if yeah, yeah, I think I choose moods. I think I do, and I definitely choose thoughts to engage with really obsessively when I feel want to feel a certain way. I can drum up some resentment for someone who did something to me in the past, and I can just chew on that like a piece of taffy, for days. And so this horizon thing I'm talking about, this infinity thing, that for me, I don't. I think part of the reason it is kind of overwhelming is because my whole life I have thought that deep thought is healthy or something. And I think self-reflection is healthy and all of that stuff. But there's a place I'm in right now that's a sort of an odd place for me, because I'm just realizing that even a lot of the stuff I thought I was doing that was healthy, it turns out I was kind of just not wanting to just be.
Yeah.
Because it turns out serenity, as far as I can tell, is kind of fucking boring. It almost feels like depression sometimes.
Yeah.
And often I can choose depression because that's kind of a warm blanket. Serenity, though, as simple as it sounds, for me is just, it's an interesting new piece of clothing to be wearing. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I think something that's really cool with what you said about, choosing the emotions and especially choosing the thoughts that you want to interact with and engage with and dwell upon, you know, not being dismissive to anybody's, you know, diagnosis or potential diagnosis. But like for me personally, my mental health diagnosis is a major depressive disorder. And so oftentimes subconsciously I engage with those negative thoughts and I have to actively choose to start shutting them out and say like this is not what I want to feel right now and
Sure.
try to move that needle. And I think unfortunately far too often people don't fully understand the power of your mind. And I'm not saying you don't need medications and stuff like that. Like there are definitely things that people need, but there are times where you mentioned we're talking during your meditation time,
Sure. Yeah.
sitting and just telling yourself these thoughts don't matter.
Yeah.
This is what I want to feel. Engage with music that makes you feel something, change the frequency,
Sure.
and live in this moment versus um, the cliche of people that live in the past are depressed, people that live in the future are anxious because you're always worrying about what's
I
tomorrow or
mean,
thinking about what's
it's,
happened.
yeah,
It's
it's, yeah. It's, gosh, there's so much territory here, and I know that it is a charged subject for so many people. So I don't want to talk out of turn, but I'm going to vamp a little bit. And I guess it's important to say, for context at the very least, that my central mental health, um, the the most consistent support and resource that I've had around my mental health since I was like 16 is 12-step stuff. Um, I got sober in the middle of high school, unbelievably unlikely, but I did. I went from being a kid, I went to my senior prom in high school because I was selling, when I was a junior, because I was selling Coke to all the seniors. But then by the time I was a senior, I was totally stone cold sober. I'm like the only sober kid at the whole fucking prom, probably.
yeah,
But so anyway, so that was, and my dad was busy drinking himself to death, and so I was able to escape death by substance, and I feel very grateful for that, and to have rearranged my relationship with substance and thought about it a shit ton in my teens, way earlier than most people do. And I feel very lucky about that. And then what I had to figure out, sadly, was that drugs or not, I could still be a fucking lunatic. And in some ways, the drugs were medicating deeper and more complex and sort of, yeah, it was thornier even
yeah,
conditions. My mom has always said that she thinks that my dad was bipolar and essentially medicating with alcohol. They didn't really have, speaking of medications, they didn't nearly have them as refined a take as there is now on different forms of depression and anxiety and bipolar disorder. And I don't even know if they've changed a lot of terminology.
right.
And so anyway, other people are much more experts at all that stuff than I am. All I can tell you is that in my experience, states of mind, I can get just as addicted to those as I ever was to any substance. I can get just as addicted to a person or an activity or a thought or, yes, a state of mind. For me, a depressed state of mind, as in one where I feel like a piece of shit and there's no future and I shouldn't even be here. And I mean, I can get pretty down there. When I was doing a lot of work on that in particular, what struck me, and I wrote about this actually in a couple of our songs, Wear It So Well and I Like It, two songs of a record called Water and Solutions, are basically love letters to my depression. And they're me essentially saying to some, I discovered that depression felt like a really good friend to me. It felt really comforting to have it around. Like, I don't want to go out. I don't want to do this today. I'm depressed. And I was having suicidal ideation. I mean, it was a serious fucking thing. And there was something that became clear to me as I was navigating this depression, that part of it was that I kept choosing it because it was somehow easier to choose this familiar, if unpleasant flavor. It was easier for me to choose that than to face whatever else was under there. And ever since then, and lately I've been really going at this. My central 12-step program is Al-Anon these days, which is, for those that don't know, the guys that invented AA, when their wives were hanging out, watching their men try to get sober and not die, the ladies would chat amongst themselves, and they discovered that they were just as fucking crazy for trying to clean up after these lunatics and fix everything and enable them and apologize for them and cover up for them and all of these fucking, and the women discovered that, and I think it was largely a very man-woman thing. We're in a pretty, just for anyone who's, right. I don't think gender's a thing, so just so we're clear, but at the time, that's what was going down. So I think my generalizations are pretty accurate. Anyway, the people that were taking care of the people who were alcoholics, those people were discovering all of this insanity that they had without drinking or anything at all. And that is exactly, I grew up inappropriately caregiving for my father's moods, for my mother's moods, for my sister's moods, for the world's moods. And that became my addiction, and it became a way for me to be important and have power, is to be 3 steps ahead of other people in the room, to be able to predict what mood was coming next so I could talk someone out of it, or be clever, or be sweet, or be forceful, or whatever tool I tried to use to fix the mood or to repair the person who I saw is in need of repair. I got addicted to all that stuff. And when I start to feel controlling, when I want someone to change their behavior, when I have that thought, I look at it exactly like being in a party and someone offering me a drink. And I get to either jump on the control train and criticize that person and do all the things and take that drink and maybe binge and just fucking get blackout control drunk for a couple of days. Or I can turn down the drink and I can deal with whatever I'm feeling without the drink. And those feelings are like that for me. And so I don't mean to say what it is for anyone else. And I know about compulsive thoughts, and I know about thoughts that feel like I have no control of them. And something that we say in Al-Anon a lot is I might not have control over my first thought, but I do have control over my second thought.
Right.
And we're back to the weather thing. I don't have control over whether it's cloudy that day. I just have control over whether I go, oh, it's fucking cloudy, I can't do anything. Or like, oh, it's cloudy, okay. Well, let me think of some things I can do that don't involve the sun,
Yeah.
And it's just the same external condition of what I can't control, and it's all about my choice. And I believe in subconscious choice for sure. I think the subconscious is a really powerful, intense thicket, and I think most of what we think about when we think about our mental health happens after our subconscious, happens with our behavior, happens with thoughts that we are thinking in reaction to some mysterious feeling that's emanating. And again, I don't mean to say it for anyone else, but that's for me, that's what's true.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree with you on all of that. And I think something that you kind of made me think about when you commented on depression being kind of the cozy blanket and that familiar friend. I saw a clip recently. It was Theo Vaughn talking to, I think it was Jordan Peterson.
Mm.
But they made
Wait,
the comment.
we need to stop for a second, and we
Yep.
might need to sidetrack this whole thing for a second,
Okay.
because I need to say in public that I fucking hate Jordan Peterson. I think he is a terribly, terribly damaging force in our species, especially for young men.
Yeah.
So, any young man out there who is struggling with mental health or anything else in life, and you have found yourself in the Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan kind of zeitgeist, uh, I just couldn't. I can feel all my control feelings coming up.
Right. No,
All I
you're
want to
totally fine.
do is drag everyone away. And Peterson almost the most, because he calls himself a therapist all the time and talks about his clinical blah blah blah, and really gives this expert vibe off when what he has, as far as I can tell, is nothing close to expertise, and especially when it comes to lived experience and self-reflection.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to stop everything
Yeah. No,
and
you're
say
totally
that,
fine.
yeah. So
And
please go on with the story. I'm curious about what the story is. It might not have
yeah,
anything to do with it. I just kind of have a rule right
yeah,
now where, as a white guy, like when I hear of a really toxic white person being mentioned with any degree of anything other than derision, I really need to step in and
yeah.
be like, hey, this is the fucking worst of us. This is the problem. This is causing harm.
And I
Anyway, so
absolutely no,
yeah,
you're fine. I
yeah. So let's
absolutely
go. Let's
don't.
keep it going.
Yep, I
Yeah.
absolutely don't disagree with you. And I may be wrong about which, because so Theo Vaughn's had this mental health conversation with a couple
And I
different
actually don't know
people.
who Theo Von is, so I can't speak to that. So for anyone
He's a
wondering,
comedian, but
okay, great. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't even know. I just know the people I've stumbled on and learned enough about to know, oh shit, there's a fucking monster hiding under that really cool, like collected rhetoric.
right.
So I don't
And
know about Theo though. So
if I find the right person, because it may not have been his talk with Jordan. Not the point to the whole story anyway.
I know, I know.
Regardless of
Yeah,
you're
so
totally
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Regardless of who said it, they made this really cool comment
Good,
about
good, 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 good. And it might,
um
and look, Jordan Peterson may well have said some. I think the way he operates, the way a lot of those dudes operate, is like two truths and a lie kind of thing.
right.
They'll say some things that sound all right, and then they'll sneak in this wild ass misogyny,
Yeah.
and just sort of it's very clever. Okay, anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, who
No,
said
you're
what? I'm sure it could be totally cool.
right. No,
Give it up.
regardless of that.
Yeah, yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. What was
So
said? I want to know truly.
they made the Theo had made this comment that he feels like he finds it really hard to be proud of himself a lot of times because it feels more
Mm,
comfortable to be hard
yes.
on himself and depressed.
Yes.
And whoever's sitting across from him had
Yes.
made the comment that um, that's your emotional home. And that's why you feel that way. It's
Yes.
easier to feel depressed because that's the home that you've allowed yourself to live in and
Yes.
grow up through. And what's really hard, and it kind of goes to your point about moving from depression to serenity, is at some point in your life, you have to move out of your childhood home. You have to move out of that initial emotional home and say, I'm going to go find a better place to live.
Mm,
And so that's the conversation goes that that's what you have to start reiterating to yourself is you don't find it hard to be proud of yourself. You find it hard to not be upset with yourself.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those deals where it feels pleasant somehow
Mm-hmm.
to be self-deprecatory and to be mean to myself. There's a lovely person who often, I don't know, I'm sure someone else introduced the phrase, which is says the phrase "mean girl self-talk," and she talks about a lot about Um, it's really lovely, and I just again, I just it sucks because one would think that terrible thoughts about myself would be something, of course, why would I choose that? But there are difficult questions to be asked
Right.
around, well, yeah, why would I choose that? And what is the benefit to me? And generally, if my story is, this is to me how addiction and shame work, is that if I do something dumb or whatever that hurts someone, and then instead of feeling guilt, which is appropriate, which is I'm sorry for what I did, I feel shame, which is I'm sorry for who I am. And I kind
Right.
of turn it into this story about myself. And then I say I'm a terrible person. Well, as far as I can tell, the central and shared greatest addiction of humanity is being right. And so if I'm desperate to be correct in my story, then what will I do? I'll do more shitty things to prove to myself that I really am that horrible.
Yeah.
And it's this crazy wheel. And I think it's how every addiction starts, is this kind of shitty feeling is confirmed. And that the confirmation of that somehow feels more good than all of the cost of it, right up to death.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really wild. So anyway, I do think that's beautiful. So no matter who said what, that's a solid piece of
Well, I
thought.
went and I searched it real fast.
Oh, good.
That particular comment and conversation was, I don't know if it makes it better or not. It
Oh, I
was
don't.
with Tony Robbins.
Oh
So
no, yeah, no, I'll take Robbins over those dudes in a heartbeat. Yeah,
yeah.
he's sort of he's Robbins. Robbins is sort of like looking back at Reagan or something. Uh, it's pretty horrible, but compared to Trump,
Right.
he
Right.
looks fucking great. Like what I would give for Nixon or either
Yeah.
of the Bushes right now on the Republican side before the right went full just insanity, just no reality, all hatred, wild ass shit. Yeah, Robbins to me is he's sort of he's like this populist centrist something. I have no idea what his shit is, but in his rhetoric that I've heard over the years, there's a bunch of blind spots. There is some, as far as I can tell, some fear of women and some kind of weird whatever dude shit.
Right.
But that's whatever. That's sort of so baked into our culture. But anyway, that's cool. I can dig a Robbins. I'm glad Robbins said it and not Peterson.
Right. Right. Um, so the other thing I want to do,
Hmm.
based off of what we were talking about before, or kind of as the emotional home,
Yeah.
let's go back in the life of Jonah a little bit here. Talk a little bit about the process, growing up and that recognition. I don't know why my camera just decided to not focus on me anymore.
Oh wow.
Um, but talk about that that mentality shift when you finally recognize. I don't know what the hell's going on there. There we go.
I love it.
When you finally recognize in your own self, not with any external voices, that maybe my mental health, maybe my mental state is not as stable as I thought it was or that I think it should be.
Yeah, I mean the thing that comes to mind is when I went to Al-Anon, I remember pretty clearly I hadn't slept, I think, much the night before because I was obsessing. And either way, I was up very early in the morning and wondering about this person who I was in the middle of a breakup with and just feeling desperate to know what they were doing, who they were doing it with, what was just this desperate need to know things. And I felt like a junkie. I felt like I was strung out. And at that point, I hadn't done any drug of any sort for 20 years solid. And so it was this very clear thing where it felt like a hangover. It felt like being strung out. It felt like the DTs. And it wasn't any of that. It was just my feelings. And they were so out of control. And my desire to know what was happening was so out of control. And that is what got me into the rooms because I needed some relief. So that is the real clear moment when I remember I better take care of myself. And I think lesser so, but maybe because it wasn't one big realization like that I remember so clearly, but over a period of time, I realized I was taking really good care of myself in a lot of ways, eating pretty well, moving pretty well, doing some mental health stuff, just doing all right. And that my baseline level of stress, anxiety, depression, I think it's all kind of the same thing, actually.
Right.
My baseline level of whatever was happening, if I didn't figure out a way to handle it, this hum of stress that I just lived with, then I was going to fucking die. And it just felt clear as day to me. And that went on for a while of me being aware, but not quite knowing what to do because I felt like I was doing some pretty good stuff already. And it was just a case of, yeah, well, it turned, as far as I can tell, it was a case of, it had to become something that I really did in my everyday life, like brushing my teeth. And it couldn't be a thing where I just went to a weekend workshop once in a while or went and, did a bunch of acid and, just sort of saw God and kind of came back. And which all are interesting things to do for mental health. I'm
Yeah.
curious about all of it. And in this case, for me, what has been more important than any one big thing has been the daily practice. And I think that feeling of, I'm taking pretty good care of myself and I'm still sitting here feeling really shitty and kind of treating people shittily sometimes and got to figure this out. And then I had to figure out that it wasn't about figuring it out. It was about surrender. And that's a whole other big conversation. But I do think it starts with just asking for help. That's what I mean by surrender.
Yeah.
I mean admitting, fuck, I don't got this. And just, yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah, it's this really weird thing, I think, where, you know, at some point in all of our lives, we're born and we have someone there supporting us, helping us, teaching us, um, you know, kind of navigating life for us.
Yes.
And at some point, we're on our own and we believe we're raised that we should be independent. And so we
Yeah.
believe that we need to do everything on our own. That was what the whole first 18 years of your life is for, is so that you can be on your own. And I think the problem is
Mm.
far too late people realize it's still okay to have someone there. It's
Mm-hmm.
still okay to have someone help you and support you and even just sit in a moment as you and I are right now and say, you know what? We can get through this together.
That's it. That's my favorite thing about 12 step. It has nothing to do with any, I mean, I think it's real smart technology, the way the steps are written. It's a really great use of words and it's a great system. I do think of it as a technology, basically.
Yeah.
It's to operate the human software. Uh, and my favorite thing about it is, though, that it's as simple as that. There's no leader. There's no boss. There's no one telling me I gotta go. There's no money. There's no ref. There's no nothing. It's just people showing up saying, I don't got this. I'm going to tell my story. Will you tell yours? And if we tell each other our stories, we'll give each other what we need to untangle. And it's such a wildly simple process. And not that other forms of self-care aren't totally worthwhile. I meditate and I think moving my body is good. And I think talk therapy can be great. And I think somatic therapy can be great. I mean, there's no shortage of modalities that are really interesting. The cool thing about 12-step is that it is just like you're saying. It's just us showing up, saying, hey, I'm kind of fucked up. You kind of fucked up. Okay, let's talk about it. I mean, it's such a beautiful, and I really, yeah, and I think it's funny, Al-Anon tends to be mostly people who identify as women, and I think that's interesting and sad because generally it seems the bill of goods that men are sold, people who identify as men, is this thing about autonomy and power and this stoic Marlboro man, I got this on my own kind of thing, and I will not ask for help. I will not go to the doctor. And so we end up doing all this crazy shit. I mean, I call myself an it, like a non-binary creature, but I understand that I am generally recognized as a man and whatever. It doesn't, whatever. And so I'm going to just keep using that term. And then women, conversely, are generally taught that to suppress their autonomy and their power for relational ability
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to talk and to share with each other. And so basically, both genders, as it were, get a really shitty deal because women don't get to really learn and be shown how powerful, of course, as powerful as any other creature is, and men don't get the really simple pleasure of just hanging out because they're so scared to ask for help. We're
Yeah.
so scared to ask for help. And so it's just everyone ends up alone. And I really love when we can break that down and just hang out with each other, especially women and men, so-called women and men in the same space. I think because it's really cool for me to hear a 65-year-old, Irish woman who, has been married to the same drunk for 40 years telling the same fucking story of me and how I were about my mom. I
Right.
mean, and she's not an alcoholic and we're not married, but it's the same. We're saying the same words. We're telling the same story, just different pronouns. And it's remarkable in that way.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And I think, I had this conversation with an artist. Her name's Mel Taven,
Mm.
and she presented this really cool idea to me, talking about changing the words that we use and the verbiage and
Yes.
how we identify these things.
Yes.
And she's made it a point, and I try to make it a point as often as I can. She doesn't use the term mental illness anymore because an illness in most people's minds requires a doctor to take care of it. It's a mental injury that you have because if you broke your arm, you would ask your neighbor to carry the groceries for you. It is no different when you have depression or anxiety or whatever it may be, bipolar. The injury is there. Whatever caused it does not matter. It's okay to ask anyone for that help, even if they're not a licensed professional, because you may not need that in that moment. It may be as simple as I just need to not be alone and watch a movie with somebody.
Mm. That's beautiful. I like that. I like that. And I love playing with words in general and checking out words that I take for granted. And yeah, things like illness and injury, and they're all very interesting words overall. But I like that distinction. I think I get where she's going with that, and that's cool. I dig it. Thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you've grown, aged, wizened up over the
Mm.
years with
Mm.
everything that you've been through, talk a little bit about building your tool set and your toolbox, if you will, of coping mechanisms and what works for you as healthy um, tools that can pull you out of certain situations or can close a door when you need to be alone type of situations.
I think the simplest thing involves something that doesn't work really well in a lot of ways on a podcast because it's beyond words, literally. It's about sensation. It's about just getting to where I'm experiencing whatever I'm experiencing without labeling it.
Yeah.
And just sitting with it. That I think the way I probably most commonly try to articulate that and practice it is I say something to the effect of 3 deep breaths. I don't think there's generally a really shitty mood that can truly survive 3 deep breaths. Really just sort of conscious breaths, and just it's not a there's no trick happening. It's just instead gently prioritizing the breath rather than all of these thoughts that feel so unbelievably important in that moment. So 3 deep breaths is a good one. I just think staying hydrated and well fed is a really a really, really important. I think the line between the physical and the mental, there is no line.
Right.
It doesn't exist. So there's a lot of really kind of dumb sounding things for me of just, yeah, drink some water. A lot of times I'll be in a really shitty place and then I'll go have a snack and I'll just notice, oh, wow, okay, I don't feel like my life is going to end anymore and that I'm a terrible person. I just needed some calories. My blood sugar was just a little low. And that doesn't sound as sexy as like my trauma. It just, it just and I'm not, and it doesn't mean the trauma isn't real.
Right.
It's just sort of what am I paying attention to? So, yeah, there's something of just going, a lot of times when I'm in a real state, I just kind of think of it as, the inner child is something that people talk about a lot. And I know it kind of like a lot of really, actually, like a lot of really simple and usable mental health phrases and ideas. The idea of the inner child is made fun of a lot in our culture. Therapy is made fun of, 12 step is made fun of, meditation is made fun of, and all these. I think it's really, I mean, it's fucking heartbreaking if I'm being honest about it. But it's, I can just sort of chuckle ruefully at this bizarrely over medicated, over prescribed, over diagnosed culture that also, any chance it gets, makes fun of like tofu and eating well and drinking enough water. It's wild to me.
Yeah.
Um, because it is, all this free medicine is there. So I think of breath, I think of water, I think of silence. Like that. Like I feel anxious now. I want to say the right thing.
Right.
And so to just take a second, it doesn't mean that I'm then going to say the right thing. It just means I don't need to live in this place where I better say the right thing in 4 seconds or else I'm an idiot. I don't need to be there. That's a story that I started telling myself a long time ago. And so I'm going back to the inner child thing to say that kid is still alive in me. I think there's a rock, if you will, that gets rolling down a hill. There's inertia that happens of, in my life in particular, my dad left young, and my dad and my mom's relationship was crazy. There was a lot of chaos, a lot of poverty, a lot of squalor, a lot of danger. And somewhere in there, I made up some stuff about me and the world. And any developmental psychologist will agree, and generally any biologist will agree, that the earlier in a life cycle an organism is, the more profoundly factors can affect it. It's more vulnerable.
Right.
And so there's just some stories inside me. And people who do brain science, again, people way smarter and more well-educated than I, talk about how there's actually literally a part of the brain that is essentially the inner child, this little chunk of brain. And they noticed that people, regardless of whether it was trauma from being molested when they were a child or something, or being a Vietnam vet who was just coming back when they were studying on soldiers at the time, they kind of were able to see that the brain was reacting the same way, and there was this very primal, basic part of the brain that, unless that was made contact with in some way, there was no way to get out of the PTSD that the veterans were feeling, and the PTSD that anyone's feeling, unless there's a willingness to go back to that place. And a lot of times I can say now, oh, well, it wasn't about me that my parents were fighting. My dad didn't leave because of me. I was a child. He was sick in whatever way he was, or hurt, to talk about what your friend was saying. But that little kid who still remembers him saying goodbye, that kid is very alive in me. And if I'm not careful, that little angry kid who is sure that the world is going to fall apart, and is sure that my job is to fix it, and is sure that I will fail in that attempt, that little kid is alive. And so a lot of times when I'm having a tantrum of some sort, and I call it tantrums a lot, it can be a mopey tantrum, it can be a shouting tantrum, it doesn't matter. But when I'm alone, I just think, when I'm in a tantrumy space, I think of it like a really angry, sad little kid running up to me on the street in dismay. And I can only help that kid if I can stay cool and say, all right, what's going on, man? What do you got? What can I do?
Yeah.
And that's the process for me. And there's a million modalities, but just the thinking of it like that, the thinking of a thought that is there ready to consume me, to just frame that as a little scared kid literally in front of me. Who do I want to be for that person? That's
Yeah.
it. That's the frame. That's a frame that helps me out of a lot of stuff and helps me not take my big feelings and uh, r- obsessive thoughts seriously.
Yeah.
I just look at it like, yeah, this little beastie that, yeah, that is still needing some healing. Still got a little broken leg, still walking around with a limp. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful because two things I want to touch on with that. The first is you mentioned that, there's often we separate mental health and physical health, but
Yeah.
I think to your point with that, like I think we do it so that we can say or pass the buck, if you will, that, well, I don't know enough about mental health to help
Mm.
you,
Mm.
but the fact of the matter is the brain is in the body is physical health, the brain is a muscle, like it's all part of the same control unit, if you will. And, if you want to think about it like a car, and the engine is going to be the brain. Well, if you don't put oil in the car, it's going to seize up. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't put gas in the car, it won't run. If you're not fueling your body and doing the things that it needs to survive, the brain is never going to function at 100%. The other thing I wanted to touch on is you mentioned, thinking back about that child. It's such a cliche, and I get that, but you know, it's often said in these mental health talks or spaces that we become the person that we needed when we were younger. And we always need to remember that we've grown up through these power struggles and trials and tribulations and become a version of ourselves now that is equipped to help that child get through that thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think of us often as we are all each other's parents and children. Uh, and I certainly think that I am essentially whatever parenting I didn't get, it's my job to get that parenting either in a communal setting or in a therapeutic setting or from myself so that I don't. A therapist I worked with a long time ago, a guy called Terrence Real, he had a great image about parents. He was talking about weird happened. I was in a documentary about fathers and fatherhood and legacy of fatherhood, and this is the therapist that we were working with in the context of the documentary. And he talked about that every parent is this. If there's the sort of there's this big ocean of our past experience, of our trauma, of whatever, behind this wall, and then in front of the wall is our kids and everyone we meet, because it doesn't have to be about parenting, spoiler
Right.
alert. It's just about our past and what we're bringing into the future. And my job growing up is to take all of this stuff, is to be this wall here, but not a wall that's sort of suppressing something uh, in sort of a stoic way, but is processing this grief, this whatever's happening, so that as little of the dirty, shitty water gets on my kid or my friends or people in my present and my future, as little of that dirty water as possible. That to me is what growing up is
Yeah.
building a beautiful filtration system so that I can deal with the shit that I had to deal with and not pay that shit forward. Because we all know that mental illness, or however it works or not, and all of the words we could use for it or not, whether it's and my thing with biology versus like nature versus nurture is that when we choose the biology part, there is this suggestion of like, oh, I'm just stuck with this. My dad was this, so I'm this. And that said, though, there's a lot of data from a lot of decades showing that child abuse, that like sort of like molestation, like, you know, like child sexual abuse, this is passed on generationally. And again, I think it's passed on through the shame addiction cycle.
Yeah.
And so we can see how things are passed on. And even not in such extreme ways. Anyone out there who's, you know, so I'm 54. Anyone out there who's gotten to the thick of adulthood and not had some really humbling moments of realizing, oh, fuck, I'm totally like my mom or my dad in a way that I don't want to be. That's the deal. Is you know, this is how we invented, you know, the myth of Oedipus and all this stuff, and all, you know, all like
Yeah.
killing our dads and sleeping with our moms, all this crazy stuff. This is all a construct for trying to grow up and take the legacy of our parents in a healthy way, but not do all the unhealthy things with it. And so, yeah, this is this idea of being this living filtration system where I literally leave the world with a little less shit in it because I didn't pass it on to the best of my ability. I let it essentially die in this form with me.
Yeah.
Is I think that's the greatest thing that anyone can do, is pass on a little bit less pain than they were passed.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree. And that's a really beautiful callback that I'm going to do to our last conversation. You know,
Oh,
almost
good.
2 years ago, you had made a comment. We talked about the soil and whatnot, and you kind of
Oh,
made
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
comment
yeah,
about
yeah.
being a tree. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, trees filter the air, they
Yes.
filter the water, things
Yes.
like that. So, you know, I think the problem is, and I think it's subconsciously baked into people,
Mm.
that we consider ourselves inhabitants of this planet, which we are in that general term, but we are also beings in charge of this planet. And, you know, whether that's Mother Nature in all of her glory, we are just another one of those beings, and we have the power to impact that change. And not even going into like all the climate stuff. Let's just use, you know, our family circles and friend circles as the forest around us. Why would we want to damage the trees that are around us?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And and if we've grown up seeing all the trees, as it were, beat the shit out of each other, then it gets a little confusing.
Yeah.
And it's important to be humble about that stuff. And again, to be humble about the ways I behave when I'm not being mindful. When I'm paying attention, I'm generally not an asshole. It's when I go unconscious or I sort of take that hit of emotion, uh, and just, and then, I mean, speaking of mom and dad, there's a story about my father that when he came to pick us up from the hospital, it was and me and my mom after I was born, and we had stayed for a few days. I think I was pretty small and stuff, and they were, you know, making sure everything was okay. When he came to pick us up, apparently he got in a road rage incident on the way to the hospital, and like showed up all kind of bloody from a fight. And of course, I don't remember this; I was just born.
Right.
But uh, long story short, I've never been in a physical fight. And certainly not around road rage or whatever. But I've fucking given many fingers and like not been my best self in traffic, and been around a lot of conflict. And there are times after a conflict, a very shouty conflict or something, where I literally will feel like I was just possessed by my father.
Yeah.
It was just, or my mom, because frankly, she did it too. So I was raised around just road rage and just wild feelings in the car. So when I'm in the car, it takes a lot of mindfulness for me to show up and stay chill, because my unconscious is full of totally inappropriate destructive behavior behind the wheel of a car.
Yeah.
And it's my, I mean, shit, just to be totally real, when me and my sweetheart were getting real serious, they talked to me about my anger and just said they're kind of scared of it. And it seemed like kind of a uh, an obstacle to us
Yeah.
going to a deeper place. And I took that on because I really loved them and loved them, and I just knew that it was time. It felt uncomfortable to be witnessed and to have them see me be angry at someone else in another car, someone else be angry with me. It was embarrassing, and I'm so happy they had the guts to share that with me. When a good friend or a loved one or whatever it is, chosen family, is able to share with me that something, a way I'm behaving, is is causing harm, it can be real scary. And I just am so grateful for it. And all I want in all my relationships, but especially my really close relationships, is sort of like, if I've got something on my face, fucking tell me, like
Right.
if I'm being an asshole, tell me. And then I get to sort of check it out and hopefully have the wherewithal to use some of my resources to check those moments. And I'm really happy to say that life in a car is really different than it was for me 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And again, not that it was ever so terrible. I don't mean to overstate it, but uh, I also don't mean to understate it. It
Right.
was, it was a, I would notice that I would change a lot when I would get in the car. I'd be perfectly happy, and I would go to run an errand downtown, and I would get so fucking stressed out so fast.
Yeah.
So I went to work, and it is work in the end. To go back to the thing of bodies and minds and however it goes,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really important for me to remember that I get to work on this stuff. It's not set in stone. It's not, I'm not, I don't have to live like this. I don't have to live being overtaken by the feeling of stress when I get into a car. I can check that out, and I can breathe through it, and I can see what thoughts come to mind. I can talk to people about them. There's a million modalities, but I've got to be able to have some humility about my state, and that there are times and places in which I am out of control and I really need help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about one modality specifically, because I want to tie this over into the music a little bit for you as well. You've got the new sketchbook from 1999 to 2001, out digitally, going to be coming out May 10th. Let's talk a little bit about, when we say modalities, we're talking talk therapy, we're talking, getting out into nature, things like that. Let's talk a little bit about sonically and frequencies and how these can impact the mental state and, just emotion in general.
I mean, it's my favorite thing, I think, certainly on this level, about what I do and what I've chosen to do with the majority of my waking hours, is that singing, the act of singing, is literally shaking myself up from the inside. It's projecting vibration frequencies, and it's such a massive topic. But and I don't and I think that a lot of people try to make up stories about exactly how it works. So I don't know exactly how it works. I don't know about
Right.
different frequencies meaning different things. I'm not trying to get it. Someone can talk to me about that. But generally, the more specific people try to get about the nature of these mysteries, the more I start to think they're selling snake oil. But either way, as far as I can tell, all I know is that music affects me in ways that I have no idea about. They're just deep, and and I definitely believe we're getting away from the sonics and a little bit of the creative process. But for me, how I first learned, I think, to handle a big feeling and put it somewhere more manageable was to make a song, was to be in this place of abject sadness or fury or fear, and to be able to boil it down into some couplets and a cool chorus And then it's almost like I could visit the mood and I didn't have to be in the mood. I could be in the song and go, oh yeah, this is what this feels like, and kind of almost enjoy the feeling because there's power with anger and there's a lot of stuff to it. And so that process alone is massive. And the fact that it happens sonically is just, uh, not a day goes by when I don't feel so grateful and think about just sort of every, just that. I mean, just the hum of a 1 and a 5. It's just, it's so neat. All those, there's something so sweet about it. So I can't say it in words, but that's where music comes in. But I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, I think the thing for me is, obviously the extreme surface level of it is, if you're angry, a lot of people go listen to heavier music, harder
Sure,
music,
sure, sure, sure.
because they want to live in that moment. And I think something I've learned growing up, especially as a very emotionally driven kid, and with this diagnosis of major depressive disorder, is while that music will always be home to me, I've also recognized that sometimes instead of listening to the songs that are amplifying that emotion, I need to listen to a song that amplifies, joy or whatever it is,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to offset that and balance it. And, I've got,
Well, we're
I
back
was
to that thing about the emotions.
right.
It's there are ways in which I can listen to really heavy, and I guess I'll stick with heavy, like the anger part, but heavy can also
Yeah.
mean really sad or whatever. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Yeah, there are ways in which I can listen to that to kind of go numb, and it isn't actually to feel anything at all.
Right.
It's because that state of anger is just kind of comforting for me somehow, and just just and so and that's why like and there's a real difference. Listening to it's one thing, getting to physically fucking scream.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like after a good cry. I couldn't urge, if anyone, the whole scream into a pillow thing, I couldn't back it more. And if there's a way people can find to really, really make a loud noise sometimes, especially I would say women identifying or sort of quiet identifying people, to just fucking scream. It is just so liberating and lovely. And of course, yeah, to your point, I don't want to be screaming all the time. It then just turns into this sort of exercise and something. So yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful analogy for what we're talking about choosing our state of mind. I can definitely choose to put on. All I know is that if I put on, yeah, Tom Petty or Slayer or Billie Holiday, the feeling is very different. All of it.
Yes.
It's they happen to all be amazing artists, so in some ways the feeling is the same of it's just a creature doing a thing that feels sincere and real. And the the room is different. It just is. I don't even, yeah, it's hard. I keep stumbling over it because there's no real, I don't have any science behind it. And again, the
Right.
science is wobbly at best as far as I've seen. And there's no doubting what the fuck happens. It's a real reminder that language, these words that we're using to try to be with each other right now, they're great and they're fine, but actually just to even get really meta about it, I think the melodies that we're speaking to each other, singing to each other right now,
Mm-hmm.
in some ways those are more important than the words. There's something happening sonically right now. There's a lot of neat studies about bird song versus the human voice,
Yeah.
and that too. I remember specifically reading this one thing about old friends meeting for the first time. There's not really a lot of new stuff that's being talked about, but it's a real music. It's a real thing that's happening, and I can feel my voice get higher in pitch and lower in pitch, and I'm not trying to do that. There are these things that are happening. So our voices are very important, I think. I think these
Yeah.
sounds are very important in one way, these utterances, these guttural, whatever they are. The words, they're fine, and I try to use them as best I can because they're what we've got. Uh, but I think what music does is gets down before the words, before all the meaning started, and it's just the hum of whatever the fuck is happening. It's really
Yeah.
beautiful. Mm.
Yeah. And it's not for everyone, I'm sure, but whatever. I've
Mm-hmm.
grown up with, one of the things that I've found that really helps kind of bring me back to center, regardless of what emotion I'm feeling heavily at that time. To your point about the words are nice, but they're almost unnecessary. I go to classical music a lot, or some
Yes.
sort of traditional music
Yes.
with Japanese traditional music or whatever it may be. And
Yes.
there's not a single lyric in any of that,
Yes. Yes.
but just feeling these
That's right.
ebbs and flows of symphony. And you get this centering balance of like, I didn't need a single word through all of that Mozart composure to know what he meant and what he felt.
Yeah. It's really something, isn't it? It just, yeah, there's a piece of music called An Ending, and in parentheses, Ascent, as in one word, Ascent, not a cent. Um, but it's by Brian Eno and I think Roger Lenoir, maybe Daniel Lenoir as well, or something. But it's just, it's essentially the same thing for like 5 minutes. It doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't do anything. And I can put it on and sob, or it just has a way of somehow getting through my brain, getting through all my thoughts and just quieting everything down and letting me feel it in a more broad way. And it's neat because this piece of music, it was on a very underheard record, and I've been in love with it for a long time. And I've noticed that it's popped up in movies at different places. And it's cool to see that, oh, good. So someone else is getting the same feeling from this piece of music that I am. And it's one piece of ambient music on the whole record of ambient music. It's unclear exactly why this one stood out for me or whatever,
Yeah.
but something happened. Something happened. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that you brought that in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, another callback to our last conversation, we talked about, like, specifically with your catalog of music, um, you referenced them as uh, signposts, and I called them, snapshots. But finding these songs, whether it's lyrically, sonically, whatever, that kind of lead the way through your life and can remind you of either a simpler time or a better time or whatever. I think that's important. And, with technology now, obviously, Spotify, Apple, whatever streaming service, having a playlist built for yourself, um, to just be able to hit play when you know that I just need to get out of my head right now,
Mm-hmm.
hit play on that playlist and just go
Mm.
sit and live in the
Yeah.
moment and feel. And I think that's really important. And I think it's to the conversation that we're having, even just about our conversations.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
we say like that, you can ask somebody else for help. Um, you don't have to talk about the thing that is hurting. Just sit
Yeah.
and talk. Have that emotional, sonic connection with someone.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's really, it's a powerful thing. It just is. It's a sweet, sweet thing to just sit and share and see what's there. It's really something else. Yeah, I've actually, when I was turning 50, I made a playlist of essentially, it wasn't a song for every year of my life and that I heard it in that year or something, but I just thought of I thought of that time of my life, and I thought of songs that I know were present in my life then. And I kind of did roughly one for every year, and it turned into this really interesting sort of portrait of me in songs that I would literally give to someone and say, "This is kind of me. I don't really understand why it is, but this is kind of me." And it's a great thing to put on in any number of moods. It does help ground me and bring about that beautiful kind of combination of self-reflection and not obsession, where I'm just gently with myself. And yeah, so I love that idea. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, as we transition to the end here, you actually made a perfect segue again, unintentionally. Self reflection,
Mm-hmm.
looking back through your life at any point
Mm.
when you felt like maybe it was time to give up, what would you go back? Because obviously you didn't, but what would you go back and tell yourselves in that moment that, like, everything's too heavy for me now. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. What kind of guidance would you give yourself without the time traveler conundrum of, the
Yeah, yeah,
butterfly
yeah,
effect
yeah, yeah. No,
fucking
I
it up?
get it. I get it. It's funny. I was just, or for the second time this week during an interview, I'm bringing up RuPaul's Drag Race, which is speaking of things that are good for my mental health. Uh, I adore that whole franchise. I adore drag in general, and I adore Ru, and I adore so many of the queens that I've known through that show, and because it's all about growth. I mean, if one believes the idea that we're all born naked and the rest is drag, as Rue loves to say, which I believe, this is my drag, and I could have different drag tomorrow, and right after it doesn't. It's just I'm choosing how I show up,
Yeah.
basically, and so getting to the point in life where I'm really choosing how I truly, deeply want to show up in every way, in my language, in my thought, in my appearance, that's a life's work. And I think that's what drag is, essentially. And so in that show, a lot towards the end, sort of the finalists or whatever, they almost always do this thing of they show them a picture of themselves and then what do you say to little whoever, and they and in some cases it's very powerful. It could be someone who has transitioned to being a woman and they're looking back at a little boy self, um and just a lot of times they may have changed their name or whatever, for any number of reasons, or they just have a drag name. And then for the first time, I hear, and maybe they even hear the whole competition, their childhood name. And so it's very interesting. Anyway, long story short, I love this idea, and I think about it often. And we're back to the thing of when I'm having a really tough mood, I just think of a little scared me. So I just think it boils down to remember to focus on, if I'm speaking to the little kid, remember to focus on what you can control and do the basic critical thinking it takes to really get in your head that 99.999% of my experience I cannot control. I can't control the weather. I can't control people. I can't control biological things that seem to be here without me having any choice over them. I don't control over how my heart beats, for instance. I don't have control over anything, basically.
Right.
All I have control over is how I show up and how I perceive this stuff and what stories I make up about this stuff. And so it really is just, I mean, that's how I think of higher power. It's how I think of anything is just my higher power is everything I can't control. And all I really have to decide, because I can't control just about anything. So all I get to decide is this higher power, is this thing that is clearly more powerful than me because it's in control of all the stuff that I'm not, is that my enemy or my friend? Is that my teacher or my punisher? And all I know is that when I view all the stuff I can't control as my friend or as a teacher, I feel a lot fucking better than when I think of it as an enemy or a punisher.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of, to use, since I'm using the term higher power already, I think it's the same with any idea of God. It's if I imagine a punishing, wrathful God that is judging me for my decisions and for all of these things, then I may end up kind of a punishing, wrathful person, or a really sad person, or whatever it is. And if I imagine God is something that I am a part of, and there's a part of me, and that there's only one of us in this whole existence, and I'm just trying to get along with this like very large body that I'm in, and I'm just trying to do my part as a cell or whatever in that body, then it just shit goes. All I know is shit goes a lot different for me. So that's what I would tell the kid, is because I have spent so much of my life trying to control people and things that I never, ever, ever, ever stood a chance of controlling because it's not the way it works. It's not how physics work. It's not how math works. I get to control what I get to control. And ever since I really got that in my body, life is simpler for me. And that's what I would give to that kid. Is just easy on the control. You're getting a little strung out on all that control, man. I would talk to that kid as if it were any number of the people I've known, with a bad drug habit.
Yeah.
Just easy on that. Remember to just stick with what I can control, which is my experience of this existence. And the paradoxes that I really can't control just about anything about that existence. I don't even know what the existence is.
Yeah.
All I have control over, though, is what I think it is, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. I've often said the one for me,
Yeah.
it comes across very apathetic to a lot of people, I think,
Sure.
but it is what it is. But I always end that with it is what it is for now, because I don't have control over it in this moment. So it has to be this thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always have to be this thing.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, this is going to change. And it goes into the whole, like, when people say, this too shall pass. It doesn't matter if it's a good thing or a bad thing. This too will pass.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, there's two really simple things that I'll try and close with, because they're just, this is what I love about songwriting, and it's just what I love about words when they're used well, is when they're really boiled down right. So there's one that I heard through a woman called Pema Chodron, this Buddhist woman, amazing human writer, everything, creature. And she said, and she was just passing on I think this is timeless old Buddhist phrase that is, the basic phrase is, death is certain. Time of death is uncertain. Act accordingly. I mean, so there's that. And then the other simple thing that, in terms of what you were just saying about sort of these platitudes that we have about, maybe the biggest platitude of all is, it's going to be okay. Now, ultimately, I think that's a bullshit phrase. Unless we're taking the very macro view that it's going to be okay in the sense that it's all going to be something, and this too shall pass kind of thing. It's going to be okay. I've kind of broken that sentence down into, the universe says, basically everything I can't control says it's going to be. They're just going to keep reality coming, whatever it is. It's going to be. And my choice is whether I say okay or not. Because I can resist what's going to be. I can say no, and it's saying it's going to be, 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 and I'm But if it says it's going to be, and I say okay, and then even if it says it's going to be, and I say okay, and I kind of go into it with this sort of, my defenses up, that's really different than if it says it's going to be, and I go okay, what do you got? And at that take, so forget it's going to be okay, just it's going to be, and then we get to say okay.
So, I think it's exactly that. It's moving the punctuation.
That's it.
Instead of it being it's going to be okay as a sentence, it's going
to
be the sentence.
We can all agree on that.
Okay is the
it's going to be. Yep, right. And okay is the response. And hopefully a sweet, little curious, humble, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
as
thanks for this. This is so beautiful. That's the trick about serenity, is that fucking Christ, is that it's not a. I think when I went into Al-Anon, years after I was into it, and I've done this. That's happened a lot with some work I've done over the years. I realized that I had this expectation that at some point I would be able to levitate or something. That I was going to be fixed, and that's not what it's about. It turns out that every moment I get to surrender completely to the void, and then another moment is right there, because it's going to keep being. And so I have to keep saying, okay. And it's a life's work, but it's a breath. It's everything. It's every sweet moment that's passing is just, the good news is that even if I feel so shitty in this moment, I do know that it's going to keep being. And to anyone out there who's actually thinking about hurting or killing themselves, I will also offer this one thing of just, and we might have said this last time, but I can't say it enough. You are an animal, not an identity. The identity part is the words and the job and the clothes and the all the human layers. The animal part, which is what we really are, of course. So the identity part, I can leave my job, I can change my name, I can identify, as a different gender. I can be a lot of things. I can make a lot of changes, and I can end a lot of things. And I think a lot of people confuse ending their identity on a certain level with ending their actual animal life.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why I breathe and why my heart beats and why the blood flows and how it works and all of it. So I just get to say thanks to whatever it is that keeps all that going. And I don't wish to do as, and I've had a lot of suicidal ideation in my life. So I'm not, I think, in fact, I think it's normal exhaust, frankly.
Yeah.
But I really try to not get confused about harming my physical self and instead go, this is an identity thing. This is a thing about me thinking about myself. This isn't about my animal self. Because my animal self is just doing a thing. It's just existing. And so, yeah, you're an animal,
Yeah.
not an identity. Try to remember that. Try to not confuse your animal life with your human life. It's a very, very different thing for me.
Yeah. Jonah, I appreciate you so much, man.
Thank you. I
We
appreciate you. This was
Yeah,
amazing.
these
That's,
conversations are the two that we've had so far have been incredible, but just in general, I think you're so well spoken on these topics, and I
thank
think
you. Thank you.
the veil of vulnerability goes away very easily with you, and I hope that resonates with listeners, whether they're fans of your music or not.
Yeah,
That
hell
they
yeah. I mean, yeah. By the way, yeah, I've released so many millions of things and written books, and I hope you check it all out. Go to jonahmatranga.com, do the thing, keep in touch. I love being in touch, and know that whether you ever buy anything or not, I do hope that any of the ways I've expressed myself end up being cool tools for you linguistically or ideologically or whatever it is, because I think that's all we're here to do is offer these weird little things out to each other like you and I were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
uh, it's just really fun to share stories. So anyone who wants to share stories, say hi anytime. I can't promise I'll write back on the social networks, though I try. But if you go to my website and bother to write to me directly there, then I'll always write back because I like keeping it personal like that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, even if you never pursue any of that, I'm another creature getting along. So I hope I've been of some service to you.
Yes, absolutely. And you've been of great service to me,
Good.
you
Good.
know, again through these conversations, and
Mm.
being able to just bounce with you and sonically vibe, as we've mentioned,
Yes.
being able to exist together.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think it's a really powerful thing, and I do want people to understand that when it comes to everything we talk about, I always preface these episodes in the intro that we're not mental health counselors, we're not mental health professionals,
Yep.
we're just people that have experienced mental health. And I want people to understand as we close this out that everybody has to experience mental health on some level. And just because someone says that they've had a worse trauma does not negate your trauma. You
Mm.
still matter, you are still valuable, and your experiences are still real.
I agree wholeheartedly. I could not agree more. And I could talk forever about this stuff. And I'm just really grateful for this chunk of time with you. And I will go into my meditation, uh, feeling really full. And I look forward to that feeling too.
Awesome, Jonah. I
Cool.
appreciate it. We're definitely going to stay in touch. We'll do more
Yeah,
of
man.
these as time goes on and
Yeah,
whatnot.
keep it
But
going. Keep it going.
yeah, I again just wanted to say I appreciate you so much. I look forward
Hmm.
to the future of one line drawing of Jonah
Yeah.
as a person,
Yes.
as an
Yes.
artist, and I'm just so so thankful for your existence within this space.
As I am yours. It's really, I'm probably going to talk about mental health even more in my next interviews because you've got my mind thinking about it. So thanks for devoting it to this, and let's keep on going and being sweet with each other.
Absolutely, man. I
Take care.
appreciate you, and
Yeah.
we'll talk soon.
Yes. Bye, all.
Awesome. See ya.